The first condition is that the process priority must be considered. Higher priority process must not be selected as an victim process. The second condition is that it must consider how much process it has already completed. If that process has completed its 75% or 90% of its work, it must not be terminated and selected as an victim process, because instead of completing this 10% of that process, if that process is getting terminated, again it has to compute its 90% of work. This is an what to say, wastage of resource allocation, and the system is considered as ineffective since the performance is getting degraded and time consuming will be much. So the large computed time process must not be selected as a victim process. Then third one is that resources that has an process has used. For example, as I said earlier, if a process is using a multiple number of resources, for example, if there is only just wait a second. For example, if we take 4 process P1, P2, P3 and P4 are in the deadlock state, and P1 has already used 100 resources and P2 has already used 25 and P3 has used 150 and P4 has used 75. In this, which has used last n number of resources, which is more, is of 150, then initially P3 must not be selected for an victim process because it have used large number of resources. Instead of selecting P3 as victim, it is suggested to select P2 as victim, because in this 4 process which was in the deadlock state, P2 is the one which has already used lesser number of resources, right? So there is a possibility of selecting P2 as an victim here. Okay, then finally fourth is this: resource process need to complete. That is nothing but the resources which was need to complete must be minimal. For example, if a process is requested for an 50 resources and it has already completed 48 resources, only 2 resources is needed and it is pending, it should not be selected as an victim process, because it has already passed 95% of its work. Instead of terminating that in last minute, it gives degradation for the system performance. So that process must not be selected as an victim process. Then finally the fifth one is how many processes will needed to be terminated. That too we have to calculate for recovering the system from the deadlock, how many number of processes need to get terminated from that cycle. Then finally sixth one is process interactive or batch process. Interactive or batch process is nothing but interactive is inter-process communication process, which is using n number of processes and it is sharing the resources. Batch is nothing but that process is working in an individual manner. If a process is getting worked in a shared and interactive manner, if we abort that process, then this process termination will affect the already executing other processes in that system. So in that situation, that process must not be selected as an victim process. These are the situations of victim selection and a process termination. We have to select a process by excluding all those 6 criteria. Then finally it is of second type of deadlock recovery is resource preemption. That is nothing but in first one, the process which falls in the deadlock state will get terminated. In this, the resources allocated will get preempted. That is, if a high priority process is waiting for the resource and it falls in the deadlock, the resource which is already allocated for the another process will get preempted and it will get allocated for the newly requested process. In that stage, the formation of cycle will be avoided, right? In this, there are 3 steps. First one is selecting a victim. Selecting a victim is the same as selecting the victim process. Okay, in this, the victim resource must be selected. That too, it must be of minimizing cost. The wastage of the resource and the time and whatever it is must be minimal. In such a manner, the resource must the victim resource must be selected. And the two processes are rollback and starvation. Rollback is nothing but the system is in some safe state, and till that state the process will the resource allocation will get rolled back. We have already seen this in DBMS, right? Rollback, that is nothing but if we give an rollback command, the table which we have constructed will go to the point in which we have last committed, right? And that is the same way. If we do this rollback process, the system will go to the last safe state of allocation of the resource, and finally it is of starvation. In this way, some process, if same resource is getting as an victim resource, then and that resource is getting terminated from a same process always, then there will be an occurrence of starvation. Okay, these are the factors which we have discussed, and the deadlock and the deadlock methods of detection, prevention, avoidance and recovery. Okay.